right. So we're going to move on to our next session. Great. A couple more great speakers today, this afternoon. So I am pleased to, introduce our next speaker for the day, Jo-An Occhipinti. I hope I pronounced your last name correctly. Great. I don't know what time it is for you right now, because I think you are on the other side of the world. But thank you for, I guess, staying up to have this conversation and being a part of WorkCongress. So, Jo-An is a Faculty of Medicine and Health, Associate Professor, University of Sydney, Co-Director, Mental Wealth Initiative, Head Systems Modeling and Simulation, Youth Mental Health and Technology, Brain and Mind Center. And I think an interesting conversation, or rather a topic and session about well-being in the balance, the paradox of generative artificial intelligence and threat to economic security. Great, I think, topic, very relevant to all the other sessions we've been having today. So I will let you take it from here, and I'll come back on screen a couple minutes before 4:30 our time. Welcome.
Wonderful. Thank you. And I just want to check you can see my screen, my
Yes.
slide.
Yes, we can.
Wonderful. It's good morning. It's 6 a.m. here in Sydney. Probably good afternoon to many of you. And I'm coming to you from the beautiful Gadigal lands of the Eora Nation that the University of Sydney rests on. And I'd like to start by recognising the 65,000 continuous years of connection that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people have to these lands, and pay my respect to their elders past, present and emerging. Thank you so much for welcoming me to this pivotal discussion on the future of work. And let me start by saying what an incredible time we're living through. Some might say that we are witnessing the dawn of the age of intelligence. So rapid advancements in generative AI are really set to reshape society and revolutionize industries. And you've probably heard many discussions about this today, about how it may change the nature of work. But this technology harbors dual potential. It's a beacon of opportunity, certainly, illuminating paths to innovation in healthcare and education and productivity. But it also holds the potential for large-scale job displacement, erosion of mental health and well-being, and risks to social stability and democracy. So we must steer this evolution to make sure that progress serves the well-being of all. Now, as you know, stable quality employment is the bedrock of societal strength, providing not just financial security, but also a source of shared identity, a sense of purpose, of status, and it fosters social connection and integration. I like to think of work as the steady pulse that sustains individual lives and families, and the vitality of communities and the prosperity of nations. Exclusion from stable quality work can contribute to poor psychological well-being, and with its most severe consequence being the potential for deaths of despair. So guarding against economic downturns and the associated risk to employment is therefore a shared concern for economists, for governments, for business leaders, for labour organisations, and of course for mental health researchers. Now, enhancing productivity has long been a key focus, not only for preventing economic downturns, but also for improving our standard of living and enhancing international competitiveness, fostering innovation, and creating a more resilient labour market. But since the 2008 financial crisis, there's been a global slowdown in productivity, affecting about 70% of advanced and developing economies. So the launch of generative AI in November 2022 has generated huge excitement about the possibility of a new frontier in generalized productivity growth. But in order to understand the implications, we need to understand what generative AI is. It is not simply automation. It is a form of intelligence rapidly evolving to acquire experiential learning, creativity, adaptability, strategic thinking, and the ability to generate knowledge that surpasses human capabilities. GPT-4 already has the capability to solve novel and difficult tasks, performing across multiple disciplines, including engineering, medicine, psychology, and law, where human intelligence can be constrained due to the sheer amount of information it has to manipulate. Progress is also being made at unprecedented speeds. On average, across a broad range of categories, a 25% performance improvement has been achieved with GPT-4, which was released in March 2023, compared to GPT 3.5, released only months earlier. And there are improved performance improvements being made almost on a monthly basis. The pioneers of this technology are now openly acknowledging that generative AI is fundamentally a labor replacing tool. And generative AI enables an unprecedented convergence of all the state-of-the-art technologies we have so far, including advancements in computing power, cloud storage solutions and expansive databases, advanced networking, and application programming interfaces or APIs that really allow for a broad and rapid integration of generative AI into a range of systems. So this is not just another technology. Over the coming decade, we are very likely to witness profound change. So estimates of job displacement really vary. The conservative estimates by OpenAI researchers, Goldman Sachs, and others suggest that about 25% of jobs face displacement across the economy. Estimates by the Brookings Institution suggest that approximately 60% of work tasks in the US are facing medium to high exposure to displacement by AI in the coming decade. By comparison, the industrial revolution unfolded over more than 100 years. But let's look at this another way. Past technological advancements have led to the automation of routine manual and routine cognitive tasks, which has decreased the demand for work requiring these skills. And this is reflected by the declining green and yellow lines in this example from the Australian context. Concurrently, there's been upskilling and an expansion of opportunities for non-routine cognitive tasks, as you can see with the blue line here. And these jobs are typically associated with higher wages. So past technological advancements that have increased opportunities for these non-routine cognitive work has contributed to the growth of the middle class and has helped sustain and grow economic demand. But it's precisely this substantial segment of non-routine cognitive or professional jobs across a broad range of disciplines that is now facing potential disruption from the capabilities of generative AI. And we have to remember that generative AI can be upskilled far more efficiently than humans can be upskilled. So the capability of generative AI, and it's important to recognize that it's still currently in its infancy, has the potential to substantially deepen the decoupling of economic productivity from labor input, putting at risk a large proportion of middle-class jobs once considered safe from automation. And as a result, this could profoundly reshape labor market dynamics. Now, our paper on this can be found at the QR code on your screen, but in short, we lay out a hypothesis that without action, the availability of these higher paid, high and middle skilled jobs decrease. This will displace workers from a broad range of professions and increase competition for the remaining jobs, or increase competition for lower paid care and personal services sectors, which will lower the median wage rates. We hypothesize that as a result, average household income will fall, reducing demand for goods and services, which will further decrease the demand for labour. Now, the labour share of national income, which has already been in decline since the mid-1980s and attributed largely to the impact of technology, will decrease further as owners of AI capital secure a growing portion of national income. So we will see an increase in income inequality, job scarcity, coupled with diminishing public trust in the economic system, And this is likely to intensify polarization and political unrest, posing additional challenges to to social and economic stability. The alternative hypothesis that is quite prevalent is, while it is highly likely that there will be short-term disruption as generative AI is adopted across the economy, the increase in productivity and innovation will create new jobs and industries that will offset displaced jobs, just like it did with previous technological developments. So we decided to explore through dynamic modeling the conditions under which both scenarios might be true. I'm going to go into a little bit of economics here. The capital to labor ratio is an economic indicator of productivity that measures the amount of capital, like physical infrastructure, machinery, or in this case, technology, against labor hours. But in the age of intelligence, while significant investments in AI capital, which increases the numerator, is expected to drive up productivity, this is also likely to drive down the labor hours, which decreases the denominator. So as generative AI is taken up across the economy, we're anticipating a significant increase in this capital to labor ratio. And as a result, an increase in unemployment, underemployment, which from here on in I'll collectively call labor underutilization. So specifically, the aims of our research were to understand how increases in the capital to labor ratio driven by AI integration will impact longer term trends in average disposable income and consumption across the economy. We aim to understand whether there is a tipping point where the economy could be pushed into a recession if too many people become unemployed or underemployed and have less to spend in the economy. And if generative AI does displace 25% of current jobs, as the conservative estimates suggest, how high does the new job creation rate need to be in order to offset the reduction in spending and consumption in the economy? So using Australian data, we developed a system dynamics model, just as a demonstration of the feasibility of this hypothesis of these recessionary pressures. More detail about the model and the data sources can be found in our paper at the QR code on the screen. But just to summarize, the model has a number of core components. The first is population dynamics. So we capture the overall growth in the population over time. We have a labor force dynamics section on labor force dynamics, including labor underutilization and the creation of new jobs. We have a section that models the increases in the capital to labor ratio due to generative AI and its impact on labor underutilization, as well as its impact on productivity and on prices. So as productivity increases, prices go down and things become more affordable. Oops. We captured the influence of rising labor underutilization on wages. So as more people become unemployed or underemployed, there's more competition for jobs, and therefore there's a downward pressure on wages. And we modeled the dynamic effect of all of these things, on the trajectory of consumption and demand in the economy. We also conducted sensitivity analysis to understand whether the findings were robust, even in the presence of uncertainty around some of the key parameter estimates. And all analyses were conducted over a simulation period of 2023 to 2050. So what did we find? Well, these graphs show that the greater the increase in this capital to labor ratio due to generative AI, the greater the labor underutilization and the greater the impact on per capita disposable income. And what you can see in the top graphs, the baseline is the gray line, and that models business as usual, a 1.8% increase per annum of the capital to labor ratio. The green represents the increase in the capital to labor ratio of 4% per annum, the yellow 7% per annum, and the red is a 10% increase per annum. Now, it's important to note that these capital to labor ratio scenarios are really quite conservative. You can see from the bottom graph that a scenario of 11% annual increase in this capital to labor ratio represents that 25% increase in the proportion of underutilized workforce that was estimated by Goldman Sachs and AI researchers and others. But you might ask, won't new jobs be created? Well, most are in agreement that yes. The answer here is yes. But there are two key questions or uncertainties. Firstly, will the new industries that are created and the new jobs created require as much labour input as was required for new industries in the past, particularly given the context that generative AI is replacing these non-routine cognitive tasks? And secondly, will the aggregate number of new jobs created be sufficient to offset the displacement? I think that's the key question. So the graph at the bottom of the slide here shows the baseline consumption, which is the grey line, versus the impact of a high jobs growth scenario. And here we modeled a 6-fold increase in the current rate of new job creation. Now, this consumption index is really just the ability to purchase goods and services in the economy, and it reflects those competing forces of productivity-related price reductions, which increase real disposable income, versus the reduction in disposable income due to increases in underutilization and those downward pressure on wages. So this graph shows that while initially the consumption index increases against the baseline, even high rates of job growth are insufficient to offset the effects of the labour underutilization and prevent an eventual decline in the consumption index. And the model suggests, and remembering this is a model for the Australian context, if generative AI did displace 25% of jobs, then we are likely to need at least a 10.8-fold increase in the current rate of new job creation to offset the loss in per capita disposable income available to spend across the economy. And a far higher growth rate in jobs or some sort of government intervention would be needed to sustain that consumption above the baseline. Now, whether that scale of new job creation over that time frame is actually feasible is really up for discussion. Finally, this heat map shows the impacts of the AI capital to labour ratio represented on the y-axis and the new job creation rate, which is on the x-axis. And the pale shading corresponds to increases in the consumption index against the baseline, so positive impacts on the economy. And the red, dark red shading corresponds to larger percentage reductions against the baseline, so negative impacts on the economy. And this really demonstrates evidence for a threshold beyond which labour underutilisation due to displacement by generative AI could have anti-growth or recessionary effects across the economy if there was no government intervention. Now, further empirical work is clearly needed, but what this research suggests is that by closely tracking changes in this ratio, governments can monitor and be proactive in ensuring economic resilience. Where the threshold lies will really depend on the features of each economy, including industry composition, occupational structures, tax structures, the strength of social institutions and safety net, and the regulatory environment. So how can government prevent these recessionary pressures? Well, redistribution measures such as taxation and progressive social policy have been proposed, but the problem of redistribution measures is that they are reactive and they retain systemic inequalities in place. Redistribution of wealth by governments also has a long history of inciting conflict and division. A more forward-looking strategy lies in the concept of pre-distribution, advocated by progressive economists like Mariano Mazzucato, which seeks to adjust the mechanisms of wealth creation before inequalities become entrenched. Pre-distribution policies focus on ensuring that economic structures and market forces themselves generate equitable outcomes rather than relying solely on redistribution after the fact. So to achieve that, governments could invest in social production, the foundational economy, and the foundational economy is the infrastructure of everyday life, and generally underfunded sectors with strong job creation potential, like healthcare, social care, science, arts and culture, and as the previous speaker was alluding to, the green economy. And these investments could include wage supplementation to really reflect the true value of these roles to society, while also preventing a contraction of the middle class due to low wages. Another strategy might be to reduce work days while maintaining salaries, to ensure that the benefits of AI-induced productivity growth are translated into widespread well-being. Innovative mechanisms such as an AI displacement insurance fund, and this was proposed by the Global Partnership on Artificial Intelligence, could be another avenue for government action, where public-private collaboration would see companies automate jobs, contribute to a pool of resources dedicated to easing labour market transitions and supporting workers affected by AI-driven changes. By prioritizing pre-distribution, policymakers can address disparities at their source and really foster a society that is resilient, cohesive, and prepared for the future. Labor unions also have a vital role to play in securing fair practices and equitable benefits in AI-driven economy. And they are key in developing international labour standards that can be incorporated into national legislation. Now, such standards would assist with negotiating for AI-related work, augment rather than substitute for human intelligence, creativity, and innovation, assist with setting ethical standards for generative AI use, and ensure fair compensation for AI-generated work. And also, they will play a very important role in safeguarding against mass job displacement. Now, unions are now operating in terrain that's vastly different from the one in which they originated, which may require a fundamental rethink of their strategies to balance the promotion of innovation and business opportunities while also upholding hard-won workers' rights and incomes. The success of the Writers Guild of America against the use of generative AI for script writing exemplifies the power of collective action. But this victory does not guarantee future success, as generative AI becomes more subtly woven into the fabric of work. But in this transformative period, labour unions are likely to experience a renaissance, which will provide an opportunity to demonstrate their enduring value as an essential pillar for work justice and human rights. So while timelines remain uncertain, there's no time to waste. Substantial investments are being made to progress the capability, the reliability, and the implementation of generative AI. Investments are being anticipated to surpass $300 billion per year by 2026. And Microsoft and OpenAI's recent announcement of a $100 billion investment in supercomputing is a very clear signal of the industry's trajectory. Those that understand the capability and trajectory of generative AI see the current surge in jobs for those with specialized AI skills as containing the very seeds for their own obsolescence, as they enable generative AI to develop the capability for self-advancement with minimal future input. The incentive to replace labour with AI capital will be high, A McKinsey analysis across 800 occupations estimated that almost half of the activities people are paid almost $16 trillion in wages to do in the global economy have the potential to be automated even with the current technology. To remain nationally and globally competitive, companies across industries will seek to reduce costs, increase productivity, and remain relevant through the adoption of this transformative technology. So this is not an issue that will be naturally corrected by market forces. Without proactive intervention, the risk to social and economic stability and mental health and well-being will be profound. So the Mental Health Initiative's research and discussion on this issue is simply a starting point for context-specific empirical analyses and public debate to guide policymakers who must ensure that the march of progress does not trample the livelihoods of people. It underscores the need for collaborative, strategic actions by government, by civic organizations, employers to lay the foundation for a more inclusive economy and ensure a stable and just transition to the age of intelligence. Thank you.
Great, great. Thank you so much, Jo-An. That was a lot of good information, a lot of data based on research. I think definitely adds value to the conversation and the sessions we've been having today. So I know we have just a couple more minutes left, but I wanted to just check one quick question maybe before we wrap up. So based on all this, right, based on all the research and the findings, and where we are looking like we're going to go, what would be your top single most takeaway and or recommendation for folks who are looking to use this data and or research info?
Oh, the top one. I mean, I think the top recommendation, I think, has to be for us not to be complacent. We need to really be monitoring the impacts on the labour market or as we're transitioning and be recognising where we are on a certain trajectory that may appear to be increasing productivity, but actually we're seeing an increase in labour underutilisation that we really need to address. I think if we waited until the crisis, a crisis is upon us, it's too late. A lot of suffering can be avoided if we are more proactive. And in being proactive, it really is going to require a government response in partnership with the labour organisation and business itself to really understand. I mean, there were a lot of recommendations for government and labour organisations that I made. I think a lot of discussion really needs to happen. Those partners need to come together and really decide what is the best strategy. And of course, being systems modelling and simulation, I would always say, well, let's model the different solutions and see what's going to be most impactful before we invest in those solutions.
Sure. Great. Thank you for that. Thank you for actually starting your day this early for us. We appreciate it. We hope you have a great day ahead. Thanks for your time once again. We'll hopefully maybe lean into some of this research and findings. And I'm sure other audience members are also going to look through that. So we appreciate your time. Thank you, Jo-An.
Thank you very much.